Hoosier Nation, we made it. We made it through the transfer portal season. We made it through the summer. We made it through spring football. We made it through fall camp. We avoided embarrassing ourselves in week 0. Shout out Florida State. And now the Indiana Hoosiers in the Curt Cignetti era are going to take the field on Saturday against Florida International. The Hoosiers are massive 3-score favorites in that one. But let's face it, right? This season has massive ramifications. This season is going to be, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, the most consequential IU football season of my lifetime. And Matt and I are going to break down and dive into this team, the schedule, the potential record that this team's going to put on the board this year, talk a little bit about the Big Ten, and so much more here on episode 332 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Thursday, August 29th, 2024, where I am your host, Nathan Christian. Here with me is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this season is for a lot of consequences, a lot of ramifications. There's massive impact that's going to come out of this just because of the changes in college football, the changes in the Big Ten, the changes in Indiana football. Before we dive into a lot of the nitty gritty here, just what's your overall level of excitement for this Indiana football team going into the 2024 season?
I think other than the 2021 seasons, I think this is the most excited I've been for an IU season. I think it has a lot to do with Coach Sig. I think he's brought a lot of confidence and excitement and bravado to the team and to the overall atmosphere surrounding Indiana football. And I have been looking forward to game 1 since he was hired as a coach, like since the day they announced, right, that he was going to be hired. And then he only went and got one of the best transfer portal classes in the country. And a bunch of really sneaky good guys that a lot of other teams kind of slept on because, they're not playing at the Power 5 level. They're playing at the G5 level. You look all around, every single person making predictions, for the most part, has IU as one of their underrated teams.
Yeah.
Which it's not very often you find a general consensus on any one given team in college football. There's so many opinions, but I would say a majority of them have been agreeing that the Hoosiers are mildly underestimated going into the season. And I think Vegas even believes that because they put the win total at what, 5.5?
Yeah.
4.5, 5.5?
5.5.
Yeah. So like they don't 5.5. That means they don't know how the season's going to go, right? Because they sit there at 6-6 and they said they can go 500, they can go 7-5, they could even go 8-4, right? Or it could go the other way. You could go 4-8, but they're sitting there right in the middle, and they really have no clue how the season's going to go for us, and I kind of like that. Looking at last year's over under, I think what it was like 3.5.
Jeez, yeah, I think you're right.
Last year's team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was just about right. I think everybody kind of looked at the schedule, and I said there's like 3 wins maybe in this schedule. And this year, I look at the schedule, and I honestly think we'll talk about it in a bit, but I think there's a good chance that the Hoosiers end up with like somewhere in between 7 or 8 wins this year. And that's not even me just being a general optimist. I'm just looking at the schedule and how talented IU is, barring some unforeseen tragedy, which of course befalls Indiana football whenever it is possible. But given that it hasn't happened yet, barring some unforgivable injury luck, really, the Hoosiers should be just as talented, if not more talented and experienced as every single other Big Ten team that they will be playing up until obviously the Michigans and the Ohio States on their schedule. But you this year you dodge Penn State. You don't play a Penn State team that's going to be really, really good. You
Woo,
don't play Oregon this year, who's going to be really, really good. We're
woo.
going to talk about the Big Ten later, but I think Wisconsin is going to be really, really good. You don't have them on the schedule this year either. You do get like a very fascinating team in Nebraska, who I think is right there in that second tier of teams that
Mhm.
could make things interesting. I think it's like Nebraska, Iowa. I would put Michigan State maybe in that tier. But those are the kind of the team Maryland. Those are the kind of teams that can make things interesting, and then obviously the rest of the Big Ten rounds stuff out. The Big Ten as a whole, very, very young, but I do like the Hoosiers' chances against like Northwestern. I think they can take a Maryland team. I think they can take a Nebraska team. I think they could even go and beat a Washington team, which a
Yeah.
lot of people are also saying are very underrated going into the year. I think there's a very good chance that this becomes the building block for Coach Cignetti to then launch his um ascent to stardom basically, and then being a household name. It gets 8+ wins with the Hoosiers in year one. That'll go a long way to doing that.
Fast, physical, relentless, right? And the line I love that Cignetti uses consistently is no self-imposed limitations on this program. And for that reason, I don't think this is a building block season. I think Curt Cignetti might have the potential to win as many games in one season in his Indiana tenure this year compared to future seasons because of the teams that you mentioned that they avoid. And look, he's quickly able to convince a lot of really, really good players from his JMU team to come over to Indiana. And I've maintained for a long time, and I know Curt Cignetti believes this as well, that good group of 5 players that have already established themselves as productive players in college football are better every day of the week than unproven top 100 high school recruits that have tried to catch on at Alabama or Georgia or Notre Dame, and they just haven't clicked yet. And so what's different in the future is that we don't know if Curt Cignetti, when he brings in transfers, will be as good with their previous team under a different coach. He brought in Elijah Surratt, Mikhail Kamara, Aiden Fisher. That alone, D'Angelo Pons. That alone is a trio or a quartet of players that you're just never going to bring in again in a transfer portal cycle that have already played under this head coach. So it's been an absolutely incredible offseason for Curt Cignetti. But as many IU football fans know, none of that matters until the games begin, which fortunately for us is on Saturday. Let's dive right into that schedule, Matt, that you talked about. Indiana has 2 softer opponents that they are going to be massive favorites against in weeks 1 and 2, both at home against Florida International and
Mm.
Western Illinois, before a road game against Charlotte, before a road game against UCLA. IU returns home to play Charlotte and Maryland before going to Northwestern Medicine Field to play the Wildcats. And then there's a bye week before IU hosts Nebraska and Washington. And then a tough ending to the season at Michigan State, home Michigan, at Ohio State, home Purdue. The way I look at this, you have 3 lock victories. You have 1 lock loss at Ohio State. And for the first time in a long time, Matt, Indiana has 8 toss ups on their schedule. And if you look at the Big Ten, the way I see it, I think you got 3 teams that can contend for the playoff, and then you got 15 teams that are going to be fighting for 4th place. Like 3 teams in Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State that could potentially get in, and then everything else is the
I
wild,
I
wild
would like
west.
I would like to argue for I would like to argue for Michigan there. I think they're fourth. I think they're a clear, like, their defense is too good for them to not win 10 games.
My one thing against Michigan is I hold
Or they might not even win 10 games, but I think they can. I think they'll
they can,
maybe lose 2 conference games, which should be good enough to
and
make.
I think they can get in at 9. All I'm saying is I have so much respect for that team that they had and that coaching staff that they had last season. I think that was a
Yeah.
juggernaut team. I didn't blink on anyone else. You can go look at the teams I've bet on. You can go look at the teams that I've talked to people about. Like, I didn't care for anyone else last year in college football as far as a national championship contender other than Michigan. They had the best coach. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe Kirby Smart, maybe Nick Saban, but like Jim Harbaugh was totally on a roll last season. And then I love JJ McCarthy. I love
Yeah,
Blake
the whole
Corum.
season.
You know, like Roman Wilson was an absolute baller. The guys that they had on defense, and I know they bring Will Johnson back, okay, but it's going to be an interesting year for Michigan. Fortunately for Indiana, they get Michigan at home. So, you know, that's going to be a game where I'm
Yeah.
curious to see what the spread looks like when we get there. But ultimately, Matt, there are 8 games that are frankly toss ups on this Indiana schedule. For the first time, Indiana plays only one team in Ohio State that is, and then, of course, Michigan as well, 2 teams in the preseason top 25. That's it.
Yeah.
It's 2 teams. So the era of that
We
Big
got
Ten East is over. RIP Tom Allen. He sacrificed himself for this cause. I mean, as you look at the schedule, where can what fires you up, and then where do you say, whoa, let's hold off here? Maybe this is a spot where Indiana could stub their toe.
I would say the last couple games. I would say starting with the Washington game into the Michigan State, into
Mm,
Michigan, into Ohio State, into Purdue. I would say you could very feasibly see the team be at like 5-2 come week 7 and end the season 5-7. Like
mm,
I could see them dropping all 5 of those games in a row, just having a nightmare, just falling off a cliff. You
sure.
start out, you lose at home to Washington, then you lose on the road to Michigan State, and you lose at home to Michigan, then you lose at home to, or you lose on the away to Ohio State. I think I mixed those up a couple, but and then you lose to Purdue. I can see a run where the team just kind of collapses
Mm.
on itself, whether it's injuries or fatigue or just some first year coaching jitters,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Seriously. Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong. I don't believe that I don't believe that coaching was going to be a problem with this team. But either way, I could see this team kind of getting into a bit of a funk and losing a couple games. But we haven't seen that with a Cignetti team. And I know. It's not been, D1A, and it's been D1B with a couple
Sure.
seasons of D1A
FCS. Yeah.
with him. But he hasn't gone 7-5 since like 2015, 2016. Like he's had like almost 10-win seasons or 9-win seasons at almost every single year for like the last decade at least. So I really just I don't see this team not getting like 7 or 8 wins. It's just I don't think they have the caliber of team. I think there's a world in which things go super, super well for IU and they end up at like 9-1 or maybe even 10-0 going into Ohio State and then just lose by 40. Yeah, Ohio State's just so much better than everybody else in the Big Ten other than
Yep.
Oregon. I think it's like Ohio State, Oregon, and then really everyone else, even though I do like Penn State. But those 2 teams have a legitimate shot of winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah.
Penn State would just be happy to be there. And so would Michigan at this point, given all that they've lost.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think you make some very good points with the adversity topic. I know Curt Cignetti's had a lot of strong seasons as far as the win-loss record is concerned, but he's taken some interesting, his JMU teams took some winding journeys to get to their really, really positive win-loss record. There was a game that
Yeah.
Cignetti brought up when they went to Appalachian State And it was the same year where Appalachian State nearly knocked off North Carolina in a game that was like 62-56 at App State. And then
That was the game where they're throwing like Hail Marys and
yeah,
like
and like
crazy
both
BS. Yeah, I
teams.
remember that. Yeah.
And then App State that earlier in that same season had also gone to Texas A&M and won at Kyle Field. So that Appalachian
Yeah.
State team
Yeah.
came back home, hosted James Madison, and went up 28-3. Shout out Matt Ryan.
Yeah. There's just stopped them, stomped on them.
And then JMU came back.
Jesus.
JMU came back and ended up winning that game in Boone, North Carolina against App State. So like it's not an apples to apples comparison, but Cignetti has shown at the FCS level into early FBS level that James Madison, at least, whether it's within games, whether it's, you know, a loss that they had to Louisville, for example, like they can bounce back, they can adjust, they can overcome some of those struggles. But to be fair, life is different in the Big Ten. Although to be, along the same lines, this is not the Big Ten East, right? And I think a lot of IU football fans are so deeply traumatized by having Ohio State and Penn State and Harbaugh, Michigan, as well as like Taulia and Greg Schiano Rutgers team, like on the schedule every single season. Never mind a team like Michigan State that has already, in recent history, made the college football playoff, had Mark D'Antonio, had an exceptional squad that one year under Mel Tucker. Like, it's not that nasty, right? Someone on the Cover 3 podcast for CBS mentioned, hey, what if we just took sort of a glitzy Sun Belt team and put them in the Big Ten West? That's kind of the schedule Indiana has, right? As crazy as it sounds. If you took your favorite your favorite group of 5 team from last year or the last couple of years and just drop them into the Big Ten, in the Big Ten West, where you still throw in a game against Ohio State, you still throw in a game against Michigan. Like that team, generally speaking, frankly, could have competed for a Big Ten West championship.
Goes 10-2.
like I'm not kidding. You're right, and show up in the conference championship game.
I'm thinking of like the Boise States of the world when they were good. I'm thinking of UCF before they were in the Big 12. Like you take any of those Scott Frost teams and you put them in the Big 10 West, they win the West. They just win the West. Like
Tulane, remember
that was
Tulane
JMU last year.
Years
JMU
ago?
was Tulane from a couple years ago would kick the crap out of them. The Hawaii teams of yesteryear when they were winning. There's a lot of teams you can go through that are from the group of 5 that built a really good team, and JMU was that team last year, right? Like they were just good. They went into Virginia, won at Virginia, which wasn't that much of an accomplishment, but still, and beat almost everybody on their schedule. Coastal Carolina, you could have put the good Coastal Carolina team and thrown them in the West, and they would have won the West.
And the one thing I'm going to say about this upcoming season, we're going to dive into IU's roster in just a minute, but like the one thing that really stands out to me, especially after week 0, which was absolutely shocking, from noon to midnight, in the results that we saw and the type of football that we saw. Like this season for Indiana football, it may not be the case in future years, but this season in particular is going to come down to coaching. And I know that's a lot to put on Curt Cignetti's shoulders in year 1, but when you talk about games where 8 of them are going to be toss-ups, and in addition, you want to see Indiana really knock the crap out of FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte so they can roll through their second and third stringers, see what they have, give some of these guys some snaps, right? Comfortably win so that you don't give IU fans panic attacks, in the middle of the afternoon or whenever the, we've been through this, right? Remember the Akron game last year? Right. Yeah. So like, we don't want to have similar circumstances like that in a season where 8 games, I think, are going to be toss-ups. So much is going to come down to coaching. And that's where Curt Cignetti, Mike Shanahan, Tino Sinceri, Bryant Haynes, are, they've got no time except for maybe the first couple of weeks to, take, there's no patient learning curve here. It has hit the ground running. I think they know that as much as anybody. There's no year one, what is possible? Because let's face it, on Indiana's schedule, a large chunk of Big Ten teams have newish coaches in their first or second year, right? Sharon Moore. And we talk about Jonathan Smith at Michigan State and Jed Fish at Washington and Deshaun Foster at UCLA. David Braun at Northwestern just took over their program last season. So, like, there are a lot of new coaches. So being a new coach isn't exactly something anyone feels sorry for. So this year one is going to come down to how well Indiana can execute on the football field, how well they can game plan, how well they can adjust over the course of a 60-minute football game. And that's going to start as early as Saturday afternoon. As you look at this roster, Matt, Curtis Rourke comes over from Ohio, a solid group of five quarterbacks, somebody that received all conference honors. There's a deep running back room as far as Justice Ellison, Kalen Black, Tyson Lawton, Elijah Surratt, Donovan McCulley, and Miles Price are going to be your starting receivers in all likelihood, even though Indiana didn't release a depth chart. And as you've mentioned before on this podcast, Indiana's offensive line looks like it's one of the better units that Indiana has had in a while. As you look at the offense, Matt, what stands out to you? What do you think the strengths of this offense are going to be? And what do you think are one or two weaknesses that might pop up, especially early in the season?
All right. Easy softball question. Thank you, Nathan. The strengths. Nathan, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good now. Let's go. Keep going,
Hello?
Matt. Yep. Keep going.
Okay. All right. So easy softball question is the wide receiver room. First and foremost, is just unbelievable this year between Surratt, McCulley. I think Miles Price has been underrated. I've said that before, but they're deep too. Like EJ Williams, Omar Cooper, Miles Cross. Those are your backup wide receivers at each single position. So, like, even if we lose one of our top guys, I still think this wide receiver core is pretty good, and it's like next man up. So I really like this wide receiver core. I think we are miles and leaps and bounds better at QB with Curtis Rourke than we have been in the last couple of years with all the topsy, quarterback turnover. We've had Sorsby playing. We've had, there was Taven Jackson playing. We've had, EJ Williams playing. We've had, there's just been
Dexter
so
Williams,
many people coming.
Yeah.
Dexter, sorry, not EJ. Sorry, I'm looking at EJ Williams, like the wide receiver. But yeah, Dexter Williams playing. Yeah, so many people come in and out of that QB position. It's actually nice to have a guy.
On that note, I know you watch a lot of college football. Like, what is it about Curtis Rourke that you're confident in, at least relative to previous IU quarterbacks?
He's steady. Like, he's not a guy who's gonna, be erratic, really. And he's seen so many football games that he's not going to make bad decisions because, let's say, a game is going south and he feels like he needs to make more plays than what's available. And I feel like we've had quarterbacks, like, you've been in some dogfights in the last couple of years, and I feel like some of the quarterback play we've seen has just really hindered the offense, on top of us having almost, I'm just gonna say, having an inbred offensive coordinator for the last couple of years has really not helped either. So yeah, I mean a better offense with a better quarterback and a better wide receiver, that better not get shared anywhere, but better wide receiver. Like, I think the team should on offense be a lot better. Now, all that being said, there is some area of concern, and that would be the offensive line. Not that I don't think that they're promising, and not that I don't think they're more together than they've been the last couple of years. Not that I think they're not better coached than they have been the last couple of years, because I think they are. You just lost Nick Kidwell, who transferred in to start at, what was it?
Guard.
Guard, right? He's starting at, yeah. He's going to start at guard. You lose him right before the season starts. That sucks. Now you're starting 3 sophomores on the line instead of 2. Which, in the long run is going to be good for the program, because now you have, you should have those 3 guys stay and play at IU for the next 2 years, right? This year, and then the year after that, and then the year after that. So they have 3 more seasons left to play for the Hoosiers, which means they should get, there should be a ton of continuity on the line moving forward, which is a solid foundation for a program, and especially a solid foundation for an offense. But they're not that deep anymore. You lose one, maybe your best guard, right? Arguably your best guard. And now you're down 1 guard. If you lose a tackle, you could be out basically your entire right side or left side of your offensive line from what it was projected to be in preseason, right? So any injuries on the offensive line could really hinder this, the ceiling of this offense, and lower the floor as well. Because I don't have to tell you guys, but watching IU football over the last couple of years, IU offensive line play has really hindered the offense. On top of us not having a QB that anybody really feels comfortable in. So, yeah, I think that's my big spot for concern.
Makes total sense. As you look at this depth chart. Last season, James Madison threw the ball at about the 42nd highest rate in college football. He threw it a lot, especially at the end of the season. So one thing I like about the staff, at least in year 1, going into year 1, is that a lot of what they're doing makes sense, right? Okay, I want to build an offense that throws the football. So in that situation, let me go out and get Nick Kidwell from James Madison, but not only that, let me make it a priority to retain Carter Smith and Mike Caddick up front. Let me go out and get Curtis Rourke, a guy who can drop back and throw the football. But of course, when he needs to, and you can look at the Iowa State game from last year, he can take off and run, put up 40, 50 rushing yards if he has to, a couple games a year. And then, as we get into Big Ten play, the weather gets colder. We know that once you cross opponent territory and get down inside the 30, the 20, the 10, you want to convert those possessions into touchdowns. That's where a really strong running back room like Justice Ellison, Kalon Black, Tyson Lawton, and even Elijah Green and Solomon Van Horst, who is in his, I think, 6th year or 7th year of college football, like a deep running back room that's versatile, that can run between the tackles as well as hit for explosive plays. Right, that's gonna come into play without question. And of course, down inside 1st and goal territory, Donovan McCulley, who was who had only 1 player record more receiving touchdowns in Big Ten play last year, right? Once you get inside the 10, he's going to be a primary factor down as far as scoring touchdowns. And then you got Zach Horton as well, who is a reliable tight end at James Madison. Like, this is the type of stuff where, if nothing else, I don't know how it's all going to work out. At least it makes sense. And so for that, I tip my cap to Curtis Rourke, because I think that's where, when you look back in the Tom Allen era, the Kevin Wilson era, the Bill Lynch era, like, it kind of got derailed really fast as far as building a roster that matched an offensive identity. And at least I am seeing that here as you go into year 1. Now, as far as Curtis Rourke, I'm a little bit more pessimistic about him than I think I am on some of the other guys on this offense. And that's where I'm at least excited to see that Indiana does have Taven Jackson as the backup. Assuming that's how it shakes out on Saturday, we don't know for sure. But at least we've seen Taven Jackson go out, throw the football, of course, early in his career at Tennessee. And then you saw quite a bit of dropbacks for him last year for Indiana, all throughout over the course of the season. as far as Curtis Ward, he put up some gaudy numbers when it came to games. When it came to games against FCS opponents, other MAC opponents, some of those games against Power Five opponents left something to be desired. Um, it's a very small sample, right? That's why Group of Five teams always play with the chip on their shoulder because they know they're only going to get maybe one chance a year against a Power Five team. So we'll see how it looks over the course of the season. He's obviously an older quarterback. He's seen a lot of games. So at least as far as Rourke is concerned, 7,600 passing yards in his career. That's something that nobody can take away from him. On the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be a really fascinating. It's going to be a really fascinating group of players out there. We're going to dive into Brian Haynes' squad in just a second. But first, folks, it's time for Who Won the Week this last week in IU sports. We're gonna give a shout out to Mike Woodson and the entire Indiana men's basketball program. I listened to Mike Woodson on the John Rothstein College Hoops podcast. I thought he gave a lot of thorough, comprehensive, transparent thoughts on how the offseason went. Obviously, for IU men's basketball, the offseason went very, very, very well as far as loading up on Umar Ballo, Miles Rice, Kanan Carlisle, Luke Goody, and others. He gave a shout out to Luke Goody as far as somebody who's come and done a good job. He seems pretty high on Gabe Cupps going into year two. I wouldn't be surprised if Gabe Cupps saw the court more than you expected. A lot of valuable information there. And I think about a 25 minute podcast episode with John Rothstein, at least as far as the Woodson section is concerned. Also, the Battle for Atlantis bracket came out. So I'm excited to see Indiana take on Louisville in the first game. And then it hopefully means they get a quality matchup in games 2 and 3, because as Matt and I have pointed out before on this podcast, Indiana's non-conference schedule needs about 2 powerhouse teams from the Battle for Atlantis to really make it worth it. So you hope Indiana does knock off Louisville and get to meet Gonzaga in Arizona in that tournament. So, folks, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more IU fans such as yourself. You can find us on social media at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. Matt, on defense, it's going to be Brian Haynes calling the shots for the Hoosiers here in season 1. If you haven't heard about Mikhail Kamara and Aiden Fisher, as well as some of these other beasts on defense like CJ West and James Carpenter, you're going to learn about them real quick. D'Angelo Pons is somebody that is receiving some preseason love from PFF as far as a potential All-American is concerned. That's not completely uncharted territory for IU football, right? We had Tywan Mullen get named a college an AP All-American during his time at IU. This is a talented defense. Brian Haynes has a lot to work with. IU did a really good job in the portal, bringing over guys like West and Kamara and Carpenter, Fisher and Pons, Sean Asbury as well, over to IU. Matt, as you look at this defense, how good can they be, and how much time do you think it'll take for them to get there?
I think they could be good from day one. I don't think that they're ever going to be great. And here's why. First year, new defensive system, and you're working with a defensive system that's a 4-2-5 multiple. So basically, you have 5 or 4.5-ish DBs right on the field basically at all times. You got two corners, you got 2 safeties, you got a guy that kind of floats in between. IU fans are used to this. Tom Allen ran a very similar defense while he was here as the head coach, and then also acting as DC. The thing is that Curt Cignetti's JMU teams their one weakness on defense really was either A, giving up a big play, or B, against the run. Teams could move the ball on his teams pretty well while running the ball. And you look at the strength of the Big Ten, especially when you look at teams like Ohio State, you look at Oregon, you look at not even just them, you look at Wisconsin, Minnesota, Rutgers. These are teams that can run the ball really, really well.
Rutgers, especially,
and that's
man.
This defense is going to struggle against the run in a conference that like to run the football. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we're good. Yeah, we had a couple of blips there. Now we're back. Keep going.
I don't understand this whole VPN situation. Anyways,
As far as our
so
defense,
stupid.
yeah, we're good.
Look, just a quick synopsis of what I said while I was disconnecting. I think the defense is going to struggle against the run.
Yep,
I think they're going to be very talented. They're going to have a nice collection of talent, but they're going to struggle at times against certain offensive schemes, and there's not really anything they're going to be able to do about it, even though they are pretty talented.
Yeah, totally fair. I especially like the point you made as far as, teams like Rutgers, teams like Purdue, that, even in down seasons, they do a good job of running the football. Of course, Indiana, fortunate to avoid Rutgers this year, but like a team like Maryland could turn a little bit more to their running game with Talia now moving on. Northwestern is always a team that you have to watch out for as far as the run game. They've always turned out some quality rushing offenses, and this year should be no different. So you're absolutely right as far as that's concerned. I love what Indiana has as far as a pass rush, though. So if you can win early downs, then you can really unleash the skills and abilities of guys like Mikhail Kamara, Linnell Carr, who had a couple of sacks last year against Michigan in the Big House. How about Marcus Burris, who's somebody we've seen do some good things as far as the pass rush is concerned. James Carpenter, very good at creating pressure from the interior and the FCS at the group of 5 level. And then you have a DC and Brian Haynes, who is not shy to blitz. And this year, it feels like, to me, the quarterback play in the conference is going to take a step back from what we've seen in the last year or two. So if you can win early downs and make life difficult for opposing quarterbacks, and I'm not sure who's going to start at QB for a lot of Indiana's opponents. Like, I know Hudson Card is going to start for Purdue. I know probably Dylan Raiola is going to start for Nebraska. Man, other than that, Will Rogers will start for Washington. Will Howard will start for Ohio State. Aiden Childs will start for Michigan State. All those teams are at the end of the season. Like, it could be kind of a crazy quarterback situation across the Big Ten, especially if week 0 is any indication of how things are going to go. It's just, there's a lot of, both quarterbacks in that Florida State Georgia Tech game really had a difficult time completing a forward pass a few yards beyond the line of scrimmage. So, that's where it does come to that point where if it becomes a game of running the ball, maybe college football is going back to how things were 10 or 20 years ago. A lot of these things are cyclical. And Georgia Tech last week won by running the ball and establishing the trenches. And they just did a better job of that than Florida State did. Now, it didn't help that DJ had a tough time throwing the ball forward, but that he can figure that out later on. It's going to be a fascinating team. I love what Indiana has from a pass rush standpoint. The secondary is intriguing to me. I thought it was kind of noteworthy that Cignetti kept Jamari Sharp on board and Josh Sanguinetti on board from last year's team. I mean, Coach Sig knows defense. Brian Haynes knows defense. I just didn't think there were too many guys on last year's team worth holding over, but he kept a couple of those guys from the secondary. Nick Toomer, JoJo Johnson as well. Shout out 219. And then, of course, bringing over some of the, Marcus Burris, Linnell Carr, Vincent Sneed. Like, it's interesting to me that Curt Cignetti said, I don't want these Indiana guys to go to other Power 5 programs. I want to keep them here, which is kind of a consistent theme you saw with a lot of folks, right? We saw Donovan McCulley go visit Power 5 schools. We saw Carter Smith go get recruited by Power 5 schools. Of course, Jalen Lucas went off to Florida State. Like, it's kind of eye-opening, right, for Indiana's team last year to get so much Power 5 interest. So Curt Cignetti says, hey, let me keep some of these defensive guys in. I'm a little bit nervous about the depth. Now, I like some of the guys that are listed as, second man up on this depth chart, of course, unofficial depth chart. But, I like some of the guys that are listed as second person up and available. The way things are as far as the world of college football. Like, guys are going to get injured. Guys might get suspended. Guys might be worse than you expected. And that's when you really have to rely on the depth. That's the one area where I think Cignetti maybe needs a year or two. Just a little bit more defensive depth would make me comfortable. But of course, you can't have everything. And so that's
but why can't we? I mean, Ohio State has everything. Oregon has everything. Like, why can't we? Huh?
Hey, you know what? It might just come down to outscoring your opponents. And Matt, as we do enter the year one of the Curt Cignetti era, expectations are a fluid thing. They change each week, and no question they change each season. But as you think about the first year of Cignetti, like, what do you think is the main goal? What do you think are the main couple of goals that Scott Dolson and the fan base should have for Curt Cignetti in year one of his tenure at Indiana?
I don't want to make this sound like Tom Allen teams didn't play with pride, but to put a team on the field and play every single week, like, you actually fully believe that you can win this football game. Tom Allen did the whole love each other thing, and it was awesome and wholesome and easy to root for. But there was times where you saw the team not only was outmatched, but they're just outmatched mentally. Like, they're outmatched physically and they're outmatched mentally.
Yeah.
A lot of times. They take a couple hits.
By the way,
you go down 2 scores.
Not to go on a tangent, but like, it happened against Maryland and Rutgers last year. It's not just Ohio. It's like, that's where Tom Allen lost me. Like, it's Maryland, it's Rutgers, like Akron. If for relative to the level of, like, Akron is a 50-point underdog on Saturday to Ohio State, and that's a team that nearly came into Bloomington and won. They should have won. They missed a chip shot field goal. Like, that's what we're talking about here. It's not just Ohio State, Michigan.
They didn't look like they looked like a fighter last year that didn't want to be in the ring for a lot of the year. And that was due to a lack of preparation. I think it was due to a lack of talent. I think it was due to a lack of good coaching. I think it was due to a lack of good program management. For everything that Tom Allen did, and he did a lot of things pretty well, as far as an IU football coach went, he let the program slip away when I think he stopped his higher standards for assistant coaches. He lowered his standards for his assistants, and the entire program crumbled. Right? Cignetti has high expectations for everything, including himself. So I don't think we have to worry about that. But I genuinely like where the program's at. I think obviously put a product on the field that people are proud of and want to come see. Get people back into the stadium. That's another thing. You got to win games to do that. We would have set attendance records in 2020 had We had a season. I don't see why, if the team goes off to a blazing start, that this year can't just be kind of what the magic of 2020 should have been. Really, this team could very well end up being 7-0 with a home game against the team that was in the playoff last year in Washington.
Yep.
Like, why can't that just be the most raucous, incredible atmosphere, the football team has ever seen? I remember the 2021 season. I was there for the Cincinnati game.
I was there
that
too,
game was
Matt.
awesome.
I was there too. Yep.
That game was awesome. That intensity of the crowd was awesome. And then we got screwed out of it by the refs. But anyways, that's besides the point. I think they want to put some excitement back into the program. That'll unlock a lot of, obviously commercial opportunities for the athletic department, but also a lot of NIL opportunities for the football program. If they can just win in year one and be like, wait a second, we just hired the best coach on the market last year. Like, we hired the guy that wins the most out of everybody that was moving. We hired the guy that has won the most football games in Division I football, and brought him to Indiana, and the athletic department is really trying to put IU not where it belongs, but in a place where it's never been in football, which is relevant, right?
Exactly.
We've been relevant 3 years, I think, or maybe 4 years. If you go back through the history of IU football has been relevant for like less than one hand of years, basically, as far as the whole picture of college football goes. No one really cares unless you're in the top 10 or somewhere in there, that area. They really don't. I'm really happy to get a top 25 invite, but the Coastal Carolinas of the world get that. The UCFs of the world get that. The all these other teams can.
Right?
It's not JMU. They just don't care. But competing for a playoff is what teams like, and the general culture of casual college football fans care about, and they've never seen Indiana in that picture, other than what would have been in 2020, because we would have been in that picture. And then, if they had a playoff in the 60s, right, when we went to the Rose Bowl, we would have been in the picture then. But and maybe in the 80s with
Coach Mallory.
Coach Mallory, you would have seen IU up there. But just a handful of years, and it's a tall task to ask for this staff to do something that's never been done at this university. But that's what the athletic department is putting there. And that's also why Coach Cignetti is saying, I'm not putting any limitations on this program, because he believes it. He wouldn't have come and taken a job just to, take the money and run.
He didn't have to.
He didn't have to. He could have stayed at JMU. He could have walked into about 10-win seasons every single year. He could have retired with a trophy outside of the stadium. The stadium named after him. A cheeseburger in the stadium named after him. He could have been the damn mascot at JMU, but he came to Indiana because he actually believes in his ability to win at the Power 5 level and compete for a playoff. With this team, in this area, with all the history of Indiana football combined, he actually believes he can change the football program around and create something in his own image. So I'm excited to kind of see where Coach Sig leads us, and where he can kind of hit, the hiccups come, where the road bumps, show up, and how him and his staff and his drive to just win at all costs, where that takes this program.
Yeah, no, great stuff there. I agree with a lot of what you said. For me, as far as my expectations for week one of Cignetti, for year one of Cignetti, is to make a bowl game, right? Like, I don't think that's very different than previous IU football head coaches. And frankly, I think that's probably a lower standard than even Cignetti would like. But things get weird, things get tough, things get tricky at Indiana. Your over-unders at 5.5. I'm not going to act like I'm smarter than the sports books. Make a bowl game, right? Like, I think that's a legitimate, realistic, but also critical goal for year one. because schedules are going to get tougher in the future. A lot of teams are going through transition right now. I don't know if Cignetti will have much better rosters than he has in year one. I hope he does, but I don't think it's a guarantee. Like year one, make a bowl game, man. And then I also want to say, like, as far as IU football is concerned, like, and I talked about this earlier, it's off to a good start. Keep making things make sense, right? Establish your identity on both sides of the ball, recruit to that identity, make sure you have a high standard for your assistant coaches, like Matt pointed out. I think that's a very, very critical aspect of successful college football head coaches, right? So, you need it. You can't scramble, you can't be desperate as far as your assistant coaches are concerned, or else you're just going to get run over in the Big Ten. There's just no question about it. Jim Harbaugh, not the head coach of Michigan anymore, but guess what? His number one assistant is now there, right? And it's for good reason. So, Tom Allen had Kalen DeBoer on board. He had Kane Womack on board, and then after that, it just completely derailed. And you hope that doesn't happen with Coach Cignetti. So make things make sense as far as building your program is concerned. You're off to a good start there. And then along those lines, make things make sense as far as in-game decision making, right? I'm not saying you got to go for it on every fourth down or 2-point conversion. I'm not saying you got to throw the ball every play. But what I am saying is get play action involved, use some of the shortcuts, use some of the modern day football shortcuts. It's okay, right? Like you don't have to, these are the things that you have to do at Indiana if you're going to win. You don't have to do these things at Ohio State or at Michigan or at Penn State, where you can go out and get the biggest, most muscular offensive lineman, and you have 5-star facilities, and you can just plug and chug the football down the field. Penn State has done it for a few years, and they've been really good at it. Michigan did it last year. J.J. McCarthy, Michigan, I think, ran the ball 25 straight times or something against Penn State and won that game. Like, that's not how it works in Indiana. You have to use some modern day football shortcuts. You don't have to build your program on it. Use play action, use pre-snap motions, go for it when the analytics say go for it on fourth down or on 2-point conversions. I'm not saying that's a concern of mine with Coach Cignetti, but I think that's a goal in year one. Use some modern day football shortcuts. Help yourself get as many wins as possible doing those things.
Why not?
We're gonna give you a prediction for Indiana football this season. Talk a little bit about the Big Ten in just a minute. First, a quick social media shout out. Folks, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. Tell a friend. Share our links. That kind of support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, Matt, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
You can find us there. Matt, this is a big question. I know a lot of folks wanted to hear your answer to. Indiana's over under this season is 5.5 wins in the 12-game campaign. There are a lot of toss-ups though. So as you take a look at the 2024 Indiana Hoosiers, what record do you think this team will put on the board in Coach Cignetti's first year?
Cricket. I was on the point last year when it came to 3-9.
Yep.
And I will be on the point this year with it being 8-4. With a bowl win. So we're 9-win Indiana.
Wow. Are you really sure about that one?
I'm certain. I've actually never been more confident in a prediction that I am an 8-4. I'm serious. Wow. And I've never been more confident in a head coaching hire than I am in Cignetti. I was gonna say this earlier. I don't think it's a matter of if Cignetti will get us over the hump and winning football games and becoming a decent program, but a matter of when. And I think or I hope to God that he doesn't just rage quit due to the voodoo that happens around this program. Because if he can muster his way past that, I think there's a chance that IU could be seeing some like 9-10 win seasons in the regular season, not even counting playoffs or whatever happens afterwards. I genuinely believe that's on the horizon very soon. But I think this year 8-4, you're in a decent bowl game. You have a good showing of yourself. You have a ton of you look up and down this roster, and I'm looking
You
at
got
it
good
right now.
players.
You not only you have good players, Nathan, but there's a lot of sophomores. There's a
Mhm.
lot of sophomores. Amari Farrell is a
Yep.
sophomore. You've got D'Angelo Pons a sophomore. Jamari Sharp is a sophomore. That three of the offensive linemen are sophomores. Surratt is a
Yep.
junior. Um, a lot of these guys that are going to be very, very important players for this team, sophomores or juniors. You have a lot of seniors on this team too. You're going to be losing like half the team next year, but at least half the team is returning. I mean, we've seen roster turnover at IU where
Yep.
you're basically replacing 90% of the minutes played, 90% of the snaps
Yeah.
played, right, for this team in crunch time. And this year, it's looking at maybe 50, something like that. So there's a lot to build on from this team. So I really believe, and there's some good things coming soon. Also, a lot of those guys that you're going to be replacing, you're going to replace them with transfers again. So
Oh yeah.
you're going to be bringing in very
Yep.
experienced people again to fill in these roles. This is not like 2016 where those guys are going to be replaced by underclassmen that barely played any snaps. No, these guys are going to be replaced by some of the best transfers in the portal because that's what Coach Sig does.
Yeah, and that's one of my longer term goals for Cignetti. And I think it might take a couple years at least for this to happen. But like, make Indiana football fun, cool, interesting again. Make it attractive to transfers. Make it attractive to other assistant coaches around college football. I don't know how quickly you'll be able to make that happen, but we've talked about other basketball schools in air quotes on this podcast. Like Kansas has made this happen. Arizona made it happen.
You
Kentucky,
UNC plays tonight, and they made it
North,
happen.
and guess what? I'm must see TV for that one. Like I'm locked into North Carolina, Minnesota tonight, and I think Carolina. By the way, Carolina was a underdog in that game as recently as like a couple of weeks ago, and now they're favored to win on the road at Minnesota. All right, I don't think Indiana's ever been favored to win on the road at Minnesota. So like, all I'm
Yep.
saying is you can do this. It doesn't require a $800 billion budget, even though obviously more money, more resources allocated to college football definitely helps. And Curt Cignetti's made it clear that he and Scott Dolson and Pam Witten are on the same page there. But that's one thing that I want Cignetti to really do over the course of the next few years. Make Indiana fun, interesting, entertaining, and intriguing for high level players, whether it's at the group of five level or the power five level, to come to Bloomington and play and further their career. For me, I'm a little bit more pessimistic on this team, Matt. I do still have them going over and making a bowl game. I have them going 6-6. I think you just need. I'm a little bit nervous about Curtis Work. I'm a little bit nervous about the depth on defense. I think there is definitely an outcome that you've mentioned where they really rack up the wins. And you talk about 8, 9. I think 10 is in the cards. Like I think an 11-1 season is in play. Right? Like I really do. Like I'm not kidding. But if you're asking me about the overall expectation that I have where I think it'll ultimately land, it's 6-6. But like 11-1 would not blow me away. And I know that could get clipped easily, but like a, the road game in Columbus is the one I'm giving away. But like there is an outcome where Indiana gets to 11-1. But I'm gonna say 6-6. I think there are some nerve-wracking games in here that people might be underestimating a little bit. Road Northwestern, for example, I just think it's going to be a really, really weird, unusual. Like that reeks of noon on like Peacock, and it's 30 degrees on October 5th, and it's windy, and
Yeah.
you just want to kill yourself. Just kidding, don't do that. You want to turn off the TV and switch to another game, perhaps. That road game at Michigan State and East Lansing, November 2nd. Indiana could be favored in that game, but you look at it and you're going, oh my God, like East Lansing, November 2nd, it could just be a painful experience. So that's where I see this landing. Matt and I are going to before we dive into overall Big Ten, Matt, like week 1, Florida International on Saturday. IU obviously is going to win this game, right? Obviously, no question about it. Have no fear.
Yeah,
It's easy peasy.
yeah.
Like, what do you like? What are one or two things you think is going to happen in this game, and then and what do you have a score for this game, perhaps?
42-10 is the
Okay,
score prediction.
sure.
I'm predicting that we figure out who our starting running back is.
Okay.
I think this is the game where, or at least in the next couple games, they'll find out the running back tiers of as far as rotation goes, who fits where, what downs are they best at, what are they good at, what are they comfortable with, who's in good form and seeing the holes.
Love it.
And I believe Surratt has 2 touchdowns. And he catches 2 tutties on Saturday.
Hell yeah.
Dos.
I love it.
Touchdinos.
Oh, beautiful. It looks like there is going to be a little bit of rain in the forecast on Saturday. Hopefully that stays away. Give me nice, sunny, offensive friendly conditions. The books have it 36-15 Indiana. I use a 21.5 point favorite with an over under of 51.5 against Florida International on Saturday afternoon at 3:30. I'm along. I do think Indiana covers this number. I wouldn't bet it necessarily, but I do think that is where it's going. I have it 38-6. I think Indiana's defense does a good job here. I'm really looking forward to this pass rush on Saturday, right? It's probably going to be the best it's going to be all season on Saturday. So like I want to
Yeah.
see them pin their ears back, get after an inexperienced quarterback at FIU. Mike McIntyre is their head coach, comes over from Colorado and really struggled there before Dion took over. Like there's a lot of advantages Indiana has in this matchup on Saturday. I want to see them really pin their ears back, especially on the pass rush, and go crazy as far as this game on Saturday. And then in general, Matt, we'll go into some Big Ten picks of the week here before we really dive into the picks for the week. Like, just your thoughts on the overall climate of the Big Ten football this year. What stands out to you about this conference? 18 teams, 4 teams from the West Coast joined the league. Things have already gotten crazy in ACC world. What are you expecting here as far as Big Ten football in 2024?
I mean, I really do think the Big Ten is the best football conference as things stand, where we have defending national champions who aren't even projected to even come close to winning
I know
the conference.
crazy, but yeah.
I think Georgia might just win the whole thing because I think they're about as good as a college football team can get before they just become an NFL team. I really do. But Oregon and Ohio State ain't that far behind. This Oregon team is legit. Like legit. There's a chance that they move over to the Big Ten and just win the conference outright.
Yeah,
I don't that would not surprise me. I think an Oregon Ohio State game for a Big Ten championship would be absolute cinema. I think that you know that
that would also be a
upends
road game for Oregon, right?
that yeah, but that also would just usurp anything the SEC could throw at it. I'm serious. Have
You
you've
don't think
seen
Georgia, Bama, Georgia, Texas?
George? I don't think Bama's gonna make it. I don't think Texas is gonna make it. I think actually it's gonna be Ole Miss is the best team in the West, in the SEC. So I think it'll probably be Ole Miss, Georgia, which, to be fair, does not have the national drawing of Ohio State, Oregon. That'll
True.
have that'll be the primetime game, 8 o'clock NBC, all eyes on that game alone. And both Ohio State and Oregon can fly up and down the field. I think could score at will, basically. And their defenses are good too. So like, that should be a fantastic high level football game. I'm also just excited for the playoff this year. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
Like, having more playoff games is great. Like, it's awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, more opportunities. A G5 team gets to actually play in the playoff. That'll be sick. There'll be so many storylines with that. Like, imagine like a Boise State this year, who should be pretty good, by the way. A Boise State team makes a run, makes it to like the semifinals.
Absolutely.
Knocks off 2 teams. That's absolute, just
That'd be
peak
incredible.
college
Yeah.
footballness. It really would be awesome. You could see, I think you could see probably about 4 Big Ten teams make it. I listed them out earlier. I'll list them out again. Oregon, Ohio State, I think basically guaranteed make it unless the sky
Yeah, I
falls
agree.
out of
Yeah.
either of those programs. I think Penn State, as long as their only losses come to Ohio State, and maybe Michigan, then I see them making
Maybe
it.
like at Wisconsin's a tricky game there for
At
Penn State
Wisconsin's a
also.
tricky game, but I still really like this Penn State team. And then Michigan, I think Michigan could very well, let's say they knock off Texas to start the year, they have that win under their belt, and then they just run the table the rest
Very
of the
true.
year, and then lose to, maybe they lose to Penn State and they lose to Ohio State, but you have a win over Texas and 2 losses, I believe, both on the road. I mean, like, that's
It's
chill.
in play. Two or three lost teams will make the playoff this year.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten has a good chance to get 4 teams. There's also the sneaky. I mean, I hate to call them sneaky, but USC. They have the talent. If they put it all together, they have the talent there. Where I think they
And they
they
have the
could.
schedule, right? Michigan plays
Yeah,
Texas,
yeah,
USC plays LSU, right? Like
yeah,
they didn't have to. They probably didn't see expansion coming, but
yeah.
like,
They
wow.
didn't have to. But I like this USC team. And I know it's going to come back to bite me in
And
the
Notre Dame,
butt, but
USC.
yeah, yeah. If USC can figure out their defense, I really think they have something going there. But I feel like people have been talking about USC the same way for like the last 15 years since they were last really competing for a national championship. And like I said earlier, I think Wisconsin's going to be pretty good. I think Iowa returns Cade McNamara, and they have a different offensive coordinator, so they should at least throw the ball down the field at some point. And
I'll
their
believe it when
defense
I
is going
see
to be
it.
good. I think Rutgers can be spicy. I think Maryland could be spicy. IU, I've obviously said that IU could be spicy.
Yep.
I do think that Northwestern and Purdue, I think Illinois, um, could be really bad. And then Nebraska, I don't know what to think about Nebraska. I really don't. I want to have high expectations for them that they're going to be good, but I don't see it. I think UCLA is going to be bad. And last team I think I haven't mentioned, or I haven't mentioned Minnesota, who I think is also not going to be great, is Washington, who should be interesting because again they're coming off a national championship game appearance last year. But they lost so much and they have a new head coach, right? So I don't really know what to expect there either. So a lot of question marks going into Big Ten play.
So many questions. This is gonna be I said it early, it's the most consequential football season in IU history. And that's a big part of that reason is because of all the drastic changes in the Big Ten, in college football, in the transfer portal. Like whoever like Florida State is a national powerhouse.
Yeah.
They are an afterthought in the blink of an eye, even though they had an undefeated season last year until they
They
lost to
should have
Georgia.
been. They should have been the playoff.
Like they are not a thing to think about anymore. Like they are not a program to consider because they've already been buried under the new day and age of college football. They weren't ready to go against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had a couple of transfers that played well for them. They had an identity that worked for them. They had a coach that, completely brought everything together beautifully. And Florida State tried to go into the portal for a quarterback. They tried to go in the portal to get Jalen Lucas. They tried to bring, keep over a coach that did a lot of good things last year, and it imploded in their face.
Yeah.
That's all it takes in 2024. Whatever you thought about college football before this year, throw it all in the trash. And so the 12-team playoff is one of the best moves the sport has ever made. All now you have conference champs get in, you got top 4 seeds with the bye, you get playoff games in some of the most incredible stadiums on this planet. You get playoff games, you get a playoff game at the Big House or at Happy Valley or at the Shoe. Like that's what college football desperately needed to go towards. I'm sick and tired of seeing State Farm Stadium in Glendale or the Superdome in New Orleans or Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis for these massive consequential playoff games. In the NFL, they do that so well. I turn on the playoff Lambeau Field, Arrowhead, right? Like it's what it's all about. College football needed that, and they've gone to that format now, and I'm so fired up to see some of these playoff games in the most landmark, hallmark stadiums that we have in the United States of America. Um, this is going to be an unbelievable year. And it's already started. Saturday is going to be madness. Tonight's going to be madness, right? North Dakota State's going to walk into Boulder and knock off Deion's team without question. Penn State is
That
just
would be so funny.
Penn State's just an 8-point favorite on the road at West Virginia on Saturday. So all the hooting and hollering
They
about
have
Penn, like they could stub their toe in an ugly fashion week one, and all of a sudden we're talking about West Virginia in the playoff and Penn State needing to fight uphill. It's
that
that easy.
West Virginia atmosphere is going to be unreal. They have
Nuts.
class off on Friday. They have class off on Friday. They're preparing for this game 24 hours in advance.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely hysterical to see some of the possibilities develop here. I mean, we haven't even talked about like Clemson, Georgia, Miami versus Florida, Notre Dame against Texas A&M on Saturday night. Like we're talking about some real high profile contests as far as what is potentially coming up. And fortunately, we won't have an undefeated team kept out of the playoff, right? Right. Well, I guess we'll see. As you look at the different games in the Big Ten this week, Matt, as far as your Big Ten picks of the week, we usually like to throw out one or two for those of you who are listening ahead of Saturday. We look across the different point spreads, the different over-unders across the Big Ten, and give you something that we're confident in going into Saturday, because why not? Matt, as you look at the different point spreads, the over-unders, the money lines as far as week one, anything stand out to you? Any potential upsets in the making as far as the first week of college football is concerned?
I would say I think Colorado loses to North Dakota State. I think that's pretty much I mean, like it's a given in my brain. I think that team. I think Colorado sucks. I like who does Notre Dame play?
Notre Dame's on the road at Texas A&M,
I think Texas A&M wins that game.
and it's A&M's favored by 3 on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think A&M wins that game.
What about LSU USC Sunday night? That should be a big one as well.
Give me
LSU
I'm gonna regret saying this. Give me USC.
4.5 point favorites are LSU. That game is in Vegas, so you would think USC has the crowd advantage there, but who knows?
But LSU fans love party.
What about Big Ten, Matt? Anything you see as far as the Big Ten is concerned that stands out to you?
I mean, USC is the Big
Of
Ten.
course.
Notre Dame
Sure.
could be the Big Ten. Not in a very suited universe. I think they could be the Big Ten. Let's see. Let me look at the games real fast if they ever.
Yeah,
load.
I'll give you one or two as far as I'm
give
concerned.
me one or two.
I have North Carolina covering 2 at Minnesota as far as Thursday night is concerned. I think Miami, Ohio goes into Northwestern and cover. Let's say they win. Miami, Ohio beats Northwestern straight up. Northwestern's only giving 3 in that game. Miami, Ohio has kind of run their football program really well. Their quarterback, Brett Gabbert, may not play. And if that happens, then it's going to be a little bit annoying as far as my pick is concerned. But I already love their head coach, Chuck Martin, coming out and throwing Alabama and Kalen DeBoer under the bus for pilfering their kicker. And so shout out to the Red Hawks head coach, Chuck Martin, defending his team. That's what I love to see. I'm also going to take UCLA to cover 13.5 at Hawaii on Saturday night. That's a CBS game, Saturday afternoon in Hawaii. Just a weird schedule wrinkle. UCLA goes to Hawaii on Saturday night, has a bye, and then hosts Indiana in week 3. So I guess UCLA is confident in not scheduling a cupcake early. I mean, they are 13 and a half point favorites, but it's on the road and it's not a cupcake. But I do think UCLA covers 13 and a half. By the way, after UCLA hosts Indiana, they head to Tiger Stadium to play LSU. And then they come back, host Oregon, and then go to Penn State. So for UCLA, like it gets crazy real fast. But putting the shoe on the other foot, thinking of it from their perspective, they're looking at week 3, September 14th, home against Indiana, almost like a must-win game for them before that 3-game set at LSU, home Oregon, at Penn State. So I think Deshaun Foster is going to have his team ready to go Saturday night in the U.S., afternoon in Hawaii, 13 and a half points. I think UCLA covers that number. Anything else stand out to you, Matt, as far as the slate is concerned?
Yeah, let me give you my one cover and my one upset. I think my cover is, I mean, this is a team that's been good for a long time. They've just flown under everybody's radar. Give me University of Texas El Paso to cover against Nebraska. Nebraska's favored by almost 30. Like I feel like that is just, that's a lot, especially for a team starting a true freshman QB. That is just a lot. And then I'm all in on Hawaii. Like give me Hawaii just straight up upset UCLA.
I love it. I love it. That would be something. One other thing that stands out to me before I forget, there's no way we're getting 52 points in Penn State, West Virginia. So under 52, hopefully you can get a 52 and a half out there.
Penn State just doesn't have receivers. They just don't. I don't understand. Matter.
They could have. They've had Allen Robinson. They've had Jahan Dotson. They've had some,
but they don't have them on this team.
KJ Hamler. They've had those guys, and they still struggle to score 21 points. Like they're not like that game. It's going to be like 7-6 after 3 quarters. So there's, if I'm wrong, hopefully, well, guess what? If I'm wrong, you get an entertaining game. That would be just wonderful. Matt, final thoughts here on this Thursday as we wind down. Indiana football about to embark on their journey. Week 1, Coach Cignetti, 2024. As we wrap up here, any final words before we get things concluded?
I think I've said this a couple times, but it's just nice to have football back. It's just nice. Just nice. It's not nice what time it is. Like, I don't know if y'all know this, but China is 12 hours ahead. So when we got a noon game, it's a midnight game for me. And then it gets worse with every single time slot. So on top of the fact that I work at 9 a.m. on Sunday, I'm just not going to sleep. Like, it's fine. I'll go to bed after I get home at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, fall asleep, wake up for 6 hours sleep at midnight, and then watch 9 hours of football, go into work, watch it at work, and then work all day, and then pass out on Sunday night to wake up and watch NFL games. I'm just, who needs sleep when there's football?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday too. So like,
I sleep in late all those days. It's fine.
As far as I'm concerned, like, anything else on your end, Matt?
No. Just super excited for this IU team. Can't wait to see their first game. And kind of see what we see it on paper, but it will be nice to see, like, have visual representation of what we're working with here.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? Like, okay, Indiana's done what they've had to do since hiring Coach Cignetti on November 30th, which again, that's 9 months ago, right? So like, it's not easy to do what he's done over the course of 9 months. He's built hype around this program. He's brought over really good players. He's brought over some highly regarded assistant coaches to this program. Like, but as I mentioned earlier, like, there is no ramp up here. Like that's what I want to wrap this up on. Like, there is no ramp up. It is not, hey, year 1 you get to 4 or 5, year 2 you get to 6, year 3 maybe you better, blah blah blah. That's not how things are anymore. Year 1, hit the ground running. I don't know if Indiana will field a better team in the Curt Cignetti era than the one they have right now. Like, I do not know. I would like to think in future they get a little bit more defensive depth, a little bit more depth in the trenches. I don't know if that's a guarantee. So take care of business week 1, week 2, Florida International, Western Illinois. I want to see Indiana put in some second, third, fourth stringers in these first couple of games. Go out there, build a massive lead, pull your starters, let second, third, fourth stringers get some experience, give them some snaps, because what you see on the game day field is much different than what you see in practice or on paper. So I want to see Indiana take care of business these first 2 weeks, and then they go into UCLA on September 14th, and we're buckled up and ready to go for that one. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 332nd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.